Alright, I'm Cynicman. I've been playing Star Trek Online for quite a while. I used to be subscribed when the game first came out, and then I rejoined when it went free to play, and I've been playing since.
Hello and welcome everyone to another MMO Anthropology interview. I'm here with Cynicman on board one of the new Dyson ships. And so say hello, Cynicman.
Hello.
And so the first question, as usual, is why Star Trek Online?
Well, I've been a Trekkie for a long time, because when I was growing up, when I was, I'd say, probably in middle school, Star Trek Online was on one of the channels on after the cartoons finished up, so I used to end up watching it because it was after the cartoons but before dinner. And I thought at the time it was a really interesting show, and I kept watching it through the Next Generation, which was what started, and then I went and followed it into Deep Space Nine and Voyager, saw the movies. So I've just always liked Trek, so when I heard they were doing and I had bought some of the previous games for it, like Armada and Starfleet Command. And when I heard they were doing an MMO, I thought that was great. So I bought it when it came out, subscribed for about over 200 days. I don't know exactly because it doesn't have the number. It just says 200-day vet reward. And when it went free to play, I came back, rejoined, and I've been playing since it went free to play.
So you were subscribed for the better part of a year. What ended up you ditching it?
It was a lack of content. At the time, the only max level content was the Borg STFs. So it was basically just... And at the time, unlike now with the reputation system, back then, if you wanted the right pieces, you had to run a particular mission at a particular difficulty and hope you got lucky enough to get the right drop from it.
So it was drop-based?
Yes.
Random, yeah. Yeah,
you had to get if you wanted, say, the Mark 11 very rare shields, you had to run the appropriate elite STF and then hope to get the very rare requisition versus the rare requisition.
So one of the things that I want to draw everyone's attention to that is slightly outside of the script of my usual interview is the fact that Cynicman spends a lot of time making really interesting characters. And you can't see the name on his character because I'm running with the UI off, but this is Dr. Faustus. And so I wanted Cynicman to talk a little bit about the qualities that he puts into his characters and the different ones that he's developed, because he has a very specific je ne sais quoi about developing characters in Star Trek Online. So I'll let Cynicman take that away.
Well, when I made my first character, since I didn't really know the game well, he had the least focus. So he didn't end up having all the build-up as the others. But the second character I did was when I realized the depth of the character creator available through the alien race. When I created Ruthven, my Nosferatu-style vampire, as I was playing with the various options, I noticed the infected skin tone and said, that's really cool. And then I kept building and I said, I wonder if I could make something that looks like a vampire. And then I just kept building with that in mind. And then I ended up making him an engineer because I wanted someone who was very tanky, because I was figuring, something hardy, immortal, eternal. And I just built from there with that in mind.
And not only that, using the Star Trek Online allows you a certain amount of emote of the stance and behavior of the characters. And if I recall correctly, and I'll be putting up a screenshot, the Nosferatu type character is all hunched over and he has his hands slightly in front of him like the
creature stance.
Sort of.
Some of his costumes have the creature stance. Some of them have other stances based on the costume and what I thought looked correct. Because I wanted a couple of different stances for him, because I figured being a vampire on Starfleet, there would be somewhere he would have to be less monstrous. At the same time, that's why not all of them have the blood spatter on the face effect. Same thing with Carmilla, the other vampire-style character I did, the Romulan Romulan tactical officer. Same sort of thing. I had a couple different. Although with her, the costumes are a little bit harder because if you show any skin, the skin tone you choose only affects your head. It doesn't affect this whatever skin tone you're using that's revealed on a body.
Ouch.
So I basically have to either undo it or basically keep as much non-head skin covered. Otherwise, it won't look right. Because the head will have the full texture of like the blackened veins, but the body won't, and it'll just look very awkward.
So, also your ship names are always really interesting as well. What sort of decision making goes into what you're going to name a ship when you commission it?
The first thing is, with some characters, when I go in building them, I kind of know exactly what sorts of names I'm going to go with. For example, with Ruthven and Carmilla, I went with names that had things to do with vampires. So you'd end up with things like the Vlad, the Dracula, the Transylvania, the Basarab, the Stoker, the Van Helsing, things of that nature. With this character, as I said previously, I used the Nine Hells of Beator for the names of my ships up until I hit my 10th ship, and then I used Asmodeus, the Lord of the Nine Hells of Beator, according to D&D. With my science characters, depending on what they are, I'll have some, in the case of my Federation science character, the names of the ships were all based on different science terms or scientists. So at one point I had a Cherenkov, I had a Chernobyl, I had a Curie. For a while I was flying one of the mirror ships, and it was the Yersinia Pestis, or Black Death. And my current one is the Plutonium.
So, the next question that I would normally ask you, I think is probably a foregone conclusion, which is, do you happen to play any other MMOs on a regular basis?
On a regular basis, not anymore. I used to play Dungeons & Dragons Online Stormreach, but it got very grindy at the high levels, and leveling up wasn't as quick for me, so it was harder to get other characters up in level. And since I'm obviously an altaholic, that kind of bugged me. And then the fact that it's not really, it's kind of free to play, but you have to buy mission packs. So it became harder to play with the people I was playing with at that time. And then they got out of the game for different personal reasons, and I just sort of drifted away from it since then. And then I'll occasionally play DCU Online or Neverwinter. Neverwinter, I'm basically waiting for one of the classes from 4th edition to be translated in that I'm interested in.
Which one?
My most likely guess, there are a couple, but of the ones they'd probably do, the Warlock would be the most likely one I'll see in the near future that I really want to play.
And it definitely fits your motif.
Yep.
Would you say that your ability to create characters that fall into a motif is strongly indicative of your desire to continue playing in a particular MMO?
Yes, it definitely helps a great deal. It was one of the things that also kind of bugged me about D&D Online, is that their character builder didn't have the level of customization I really was striving for. And to some respects, Neverwinter is not quite as in-depth as I would like. I think STO really has the best character designer I've seen in a long time. I mean, especially if you go with the alien, I mean, you can do anything, as Guahafaga clearly shows.
He's referring to another player who has a blue alien character with a gigantic head and very, very thin arms that looks very weird. A person who likes to attempt to break the costuming in most MMO games, built by a person who does that. So, how do you use the MMOs and gaming differently than you do other entertainment, like watching TV or reading books?
Well, the nice thing about a lot of at least the Star Trek Online, is the fact that because of the nature of the instances, I can play it in spurts. I can log on to a character, run a couple STFs, maybe a daily mission or two, log on to another character. So it's easier to prevent myself from getting bored with it because my characters tend to have differing play styles. So I get a different experience with each one, so it's not just running the same character, with 3 or 4 different skins. They actually play differently and have different build setups for the most part. I mean, some of them end up being similar just by nature of what they're trying to accomplish. But for the most part, they're pretty varied overall.
When you go to Star Trek Online, what sort of stuff are you doing? Are you primarily here to blow up bad guys, or is there some other quality from the game that you're trying to get out of it?
Me, by and large, it's the space combat. It's one of the things I loved about Starfleet Command, that series, and it's the thing that makes this game great. This game has what I think is fantastic space combat.
And a really interesting feature in that while all characters have their own setup, they also are captains of starships, which to me has always felt like having a second character attached to your character because it has its own paper doll and its own class, quote-unquote.
And in a lot of ways, it's almost more in-depth than your character because each class has a handful of abilities they get over the levels. For example, like the science officer gets the sensor scan, the subnucleonic beam, the scattering field. And yes, you have your skills to spend, but it's really the ship and the bridge officers you choose that really flavors your space combat and gives you that unique feel. So you could have 2 tactical officers or even 3 in different ships and have entirely different play styles because of that. So I think that's a part of what makes the space combat so interesting, and part of why I think the ground combat isn't as robust, because you don't have the same level of control over the abilities. The kits are just, you hope to find one that has the sort of right abilities you were using. Whereas ideally I'd like something where instead of a single kit you have power slots similar to how like a BOF setup works, and you could just slot in the powers you want and really get full customization of your particular powers on the ground. I feel that's kind of why I tend to shy away from the ground, in addition to a lot of ground missions feeling sometimes overly long just because of the odd map geography and distances between certain things. I'd say of all their ground areas, I'd say the Voth area is one of the best they've done, because it's very rare you're running around with nothing to do. You're generally close to an objective, barring when you get really close to the V-Rexes spawning. But I'm mainly here for the space combat. Ground is a couple characters I'll use ground on for either grinding Omega Marks on Defera or doing some of the ground stuff with you in the Dyson, or the occasional ground mission because I want a particular item or I'm running through the story.
So we're gonna run short on time really, really soon. So I want to give you the last question that I give everyone who comes for an interview, and that is, what is the most memorable experience that you've had in Star Trek Online?
I'd have to say getting my first character to 50. There was just something really satisfying about hitting that max level, especially because at the time there wasn't nearly as many missions, so it was a lot harder to just hit 50 through the storyline missions. So because of that, it felt a little bit more like an accomplishment than it does now. Not that it isn't an accomplishment, but at that time it was really felt like I had done something. It's like, I'm finally there. It took a couple months to get there, but now I'm there. Whereas now, if I really grind it down, it's a little harder now that you don't have the Mirror Universe event, but if I really put my nose to it, I could probably get a character level to 50 in a handful of days.
Do you foresee adding another character to your stable?
I'll probably be adding at least one more because I don't have a Romulan engineer yet. I want to get some more of my reputations up so that way I can get the sponsorship going. So it's easier to get through my rep on that character. That, and I don't have a theme yet in mind.
Excellent.
So it's,
Well,
then otherwise I probably won't get another character unless a new faction or a new ship or something comes out that I'm like, I have to build something around that.
Well, that's all the time that I have for this, so thank you so much for coming along and doing this interview
Certainly,
with
sir.
me. And everyone else watching, all of you, we'll see you later. Good night and good dreams.
Do you play online games? Do you have Skype? Then we'd love to interview you on Massive Online Anthropology. Join the fascinating thousands who've spoken about their online gaming experience and be the envy of all your friends. Or at least get the MMO Anthropology Geek Merit Badge. Sorry, no t-shirt. See you then!